All right, everyone. So we've got an addendum to class. Um, and let's see, I got to revert this. So we were looking at blend modes and what was going on with them and why it wasn't showing up on our grayscale thing. So we have these two layers that if I put them to normal, they just look, and I did this real fast. So normal, there we go. But things weren't showing up on if we put it to hue. So if I put this to hue, they suddenly vanished. And then later on I tried color, and I'll show you why I thought that was wrong in a minute. It wasn't. But I want to go over why we're not seeing the hue in here at all. So if we look up our technical definition of these things, hue says it creates a result color with the luminance and saturation from the base and the hue from the blend color. And so you would think that it would be like, oh, the color comes from this layer and everything else comes from this layer. Slight problem. Um, there's lots of luminance information on this original image. Lights and darks, it's all there. But there is technically zero saturation information, which means that when you apply something with a hue, it reads this base layer that says zero saturation. Well, if you have zero saturation on something that's only color, right? Like then there's no color in it. Yeah. So that's the problem. So how much color do you show on this? None. And the only information, yes, technically there is light and dark information coming from that layer, but there's no saturation information, so therefore it doesn't show up. Now, if you have something with color in it and you grab your brush and you set this to hue, you will see it. And you can see how it changes the green a lot, but these, beigey clouds, it doesn't change that much, right? Because it's applying a hue. So it's basically colorizing the whole thing. It's like a way to make there we go. So we've suddenly gone from spring to autumn. Because it's taken all of the green out, and now we've got it's a drought or something, let's say. And if I wanted to, I could actually turn this down a little bit, and so it's only taking color information from this layer, but saturation came from here, which is why there's lots of light spots. It's why this back here is kind of bright. If I clean this up. Now it's actually something useful, right? So your hue blend mode has plenty of uses, but only on color images. So part of this is I just forgot between hue and color, which one we should use on black and white. So that's my fault. So we would set these to color. Now here's the other thing I kind of messed up a little bit, is that I was remembering something very specific. I had actually applied some blue to this during class. I remember I applied blue. Hello? Sorry, my hotkeys are stuck, to this thing, and it was really bright, and I went, what is happening? And it's because I remembered doing this before. And so I double checked from the last time I taught this class, and yes, I did have it set to color, not hue. But I was also remembering a completely different section of this picture, which when you do it up properly, there we go. Now that is actually still kind of different. And I think what's happening, this is a little bit greener, it's a little bit darker, even though I'm still pulling a pretty dark color. And one of the things that's also happening is that the processor changes, right? Because I have a go-to color that I have for this. Like I'm always using the same, you guys have probably noticed this. I pull the same colors off all the time. And so, I'm using the same ones and they still come out really bright this time around. So one of the things that's happening is that there are different processors. So if you go into here, edit, preference, performance, there's a legacy compositing thing. And even that doesn't always bring it back to the old way of things. But one of the things that's happened, I've been working in this for 20 years, is that the way it handles, oh, this is the color, oh, this is the, luminance, that algorithm can change over time. And since it's been a few years since I taught the class, and since Photoshop had major updates, when I switched this from, overlay or soft light or whatever to color, I went, how the heck? that looks weird. Like I'm looking at it going, I don't get it. Like this looks completely bizarre and it was like unrecognizable. And it's because it's a different processor um, than what I might be used to. And I could probably actually, I wonder if it's going to change this at all. I don't know if it's going to change. Um, you got a little bit more detail there. Um, but you'd be surprised what can happen between these things. Like what can become different between these things. Let me see if this, yeah. So as you're working in these programs, if you're in this field as long as I have been, if you step away from stuff and go back, things might be a little bit different than you remember. Also, something that throws us off is you can see how dark these colors are. And we get used to thinking that that's the color. We just intrinsically think that's the color. But then we do this, and suddenly they're way brighter. Well, that's because this is actually relatively light. This is actually not that dark. This is dark. This is very bright. And so technically speaking, what we're looking at, if we go in here, is this color, or like actually somewhere kind of in the middle. And so when it pulls its luminance from this bright background, it changes the color, but it doesn't change the color part of the color, right? The hue is still this greenish blue. The hue is still this orangey brown. Um, but the luminance changes. And when you change the luminance, that for us changes the definition of the color. And I can think of no better example of that than the color red. For the most part, when we look at something, this color right here is green and this color right here is green. This one feels neon-y and this one feels green, but it's green, right? Blue all the way down to blue. But when you are at red, as soon as you make things a little bit lighter, it turns pink in our brains, right? We have a differentiation between deep red and light red. We have a different word for it. And so we perceive these colors as two different things. And so one thing that will happen is you can choose like like what feels like a deep red color, right? And I'm going to apply it to this. And suddenly it's pink and our brains just go, what? And it's because the luminance information, this information right here, came from this layer. And excuse me, that means that it's from our perception changed colors. And so it becomes a little bit trickier to work with. And so what does that mean for us? Yes, this assignment, I said use the color or whatever. I also said you could use other blend modes. Like as originally written, everyone was like, oh, just use like the color and just, you're changing the color, but nothing else, and that's colorizing. But if you want certain looks on things, you may have to go with an overlay or a soft light or something like that. You can see that feels less pink to me. And so that might be the look I go for whenever I'm doing something that's redder. Whereas with blue, that getting a little bit brighter, that I don't mind as much. And it might help me, stick with a whole overall look here. So this was the me sort of getting flummoxed during the middle of the lesson is a lesson in and of itself. A lesson in how this software can change over time, so be aware of that. A lesson in how our perception of color is, we tell ourselves this is the hue, this is the color of the color. That's not the only part of the color though, at least when we're just, intuitively looking at it. So when we have these blend modes and they start to behave a little bit differently than you think, go to Google, look up, you can just get to right to Adobe, Photoshop blend modes. Look up the technical definition. What is it telling you? Oh, the luminance is coming from the base color. So the luminance of what I chose is going to change. How does that change what the color looks like? If I change the luminance of something from here to here, I'm changing it from blue to cyan, right? Technically this is just a really deep cyan, but we don't think of it that way, right? So the luminance also matters. All right, so hopefully that helps. When it comes to this assignment, you do not have to stick with just the color version of things. You can, of course, just whatchamacallit, use whatever blend modes you would like to get the look that you want. Um, and just realize that sometimes these blend modes do not behave intuitively the way we think they would.